banking has become less of a problem. Still not perfect, but less of a problem. I think that the business costs and access to capital still are, though. If I want to open a bakery today, I can go to my bank and get a loan. If I want to open a cannabis dispensary, I can't.
Welcome to the NJ Criminal Podcast and part 3 in this series.
You are part of different committees and associations. Just briefly, the New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform Steering Committee. What is that? Can you describe that?
So in 2014, 2015, myself, the folks at the NAACP, ACLU, a group now called Doctors for Cannabis Regulation that really wasn't formed anymore, a gentleman like Dr. Nathan, the representative from the Municipal Prosecutors Association, who, by the way, was on the Republican side of the aisle, and a couple others, folks from law enforcement and some others, got together to really advocate for this. And it's an interesting experiment. And you could think about in the Wayback Machine in 2015, the cannabis legalization of cannabis in New Jersey was polling in the 40s. Okay, the support was not there. Governor Christie was in office, and I'm friends with Governor Christie at the time. I'm a Democrat, but he laughed at me. He said, "This ain't ever happening, pal." And I said, "Well, we're not stopping." He said, "Have fun storming the castle." He goes, "This is great for me." He's like, "We're not doing it." So, but you kind of saw what you're up against. This was done not by force. We changed hearts and minds, and we took arguments. I mean, we were in church basements. I remember going to the Cherry Hill Library in some tiny little room with 15 people just to talk about this, and a lot of people yelling and screaming at us at the time about how, it was the devil's lettuce and we're killing children by doing it. And you just take the issues one by one. And the profound one, I'll tell you, is I did a forum at a business event, and a gentleman came up after, very angry at me. And I'm used to that in these settings sometimes. And we're ruining America, and he's not going to be able to hire people anymore. And this is such a stupid idea. And this is why our economy and our state is going down the toilet. And I said to him, two things. What do you do, right? What do you do with a 30-year-old person that sold dime bags when they were 18 to put food on their, table? And what do they do now? They need to go get a job and go work. Great. They can't. They have a criminal record, right, for doing something stupid a while ago, and they can't go. They couldn't go to school. They couldn't get a college loan, and they can't come work for you at your company, right?
Right. We've talked about that issue on other episodes of this podcast, so it's a huge issue.
And that's about expungement, right? And boom, you got him. Absolutely, we should do that. And you're right. We shouldn't be arresting people for this anymore. Okay. That's step one. Now, the next thing was I asked him what he did for a living. This man ran a company that manufactured high-end plastic bags for tech companies. So when you open your cell phone and you get that bag full of goodies inside, he made those things. So I said to him, "Do they have zippers on them?" He goes, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, of course. Yeah, we do all that kind of stuff." I said, "Have you ever thought about being a supplier to a cannabis company?" Whole attitude change.
No, well, I bet.
How would we do that? And I go, "Well, you don't think the guys coming from Colorado are bringing their bags with them when they come? They're going to hire a local supplier. And if you're doing that now for tech companies, don't you think you've got the ability to, transfer those kind of ability?" We had a new convert, right? But you've got to take people as they come, because some folks are here for the racial social justice arguments, and the ACLU and the NAACP laid out phenomenal research and arguments to show that Black and brown people were tagged 4 times as likely to be arrested than I would be, despite similar use, right, in terms of cannabis. But Black and brown people were targeted and incarcerated more, and it was disparate. And we talked about the fact that having a fair industry would ensure that we were taking people out of the black market and bringing them in the sunshine. We had those conversations. We had them across a variety of different cultural lines. We took people as they come, and we educated, and we won 70% of the vote in 2020 by doing that. And in 5 short years, really, we're able to change people's hearts and minds on this topic.
By providing facts, right?
Facts. We took every issue as it came. There was a concern over increase in drug driving. We showed that through research that in Colorado and Seattle and some other places, they had not seen an incredible bump. There was an initial bump in insurance costs, which likely insurers that decided to bill a premium in, but there was an increase in crashes. There was, however, in Colorado, a huge increase in hospitalizations and ER visits at the initial stage of legalization. And that was because of a lack of education on edibles and dosing. And that's actually been all changed through regulatory work, where you're required to have proper dosage and education about people were eating too many edibles
Right.
and feeling horrendous. And they thankfully weren't dying, but they wish they did. And then
Right.
we're presenting at ERs. But that was a hiccup, but we owned it. We owned that issue. We dealt with it, and you didn't hide it. You didn't yell at people and call them racist for bringing it up. You addressed it. And by the way, the industry helped to fix it in Colorado, Las Vegas, and other places.
Yeah, I do think one issue that needs to be discussed, and I'm trying to have someone come on to talk about it, is the issue of being able to quantify when you're talking about the topic of impaired driving, and how that is going to be dealt with by, both prosecutors. I'm a former prosecutor, and defense attorneys, and certainly we've got the State versus Oleneski case that's pending before the Supreme Court, which is they're challenging the drug recognition experts and the admissibility of all that. But I do think, and I have not done any real research in other states, but how they are. Is there a bright line cutoff? Or are they, is it basically going to be a matter of taking a blood draw and quantifying the active metabolite? But I think that's going to be a little bit of an issue that's going to have to be fleshed out by law enforcement.
Listen, the one thing I know, I told somebody, I had the pleasure of sitting in the municipal court in Evesham in South Jersey for a traffic violation.
God bless you.
Yeah, it was a fun experiment, but I was pleading down a moving violation. But I sat there, and the first ones they do are all the drug violations and DUIs, and there were several convictions for DUIs for driving under the influence of narcotics or drugs, and several were from cannabis. So previously, and you refer to the Supreme Court case, and we're going to see where that ends up. We were using drug recognition experts. Sometimes it's a field sobriety coupled with a blood draw. There was just an incident where I think there was a death where a woman was charged, I think in Ocean County.
I just saw that.
Yeah, it was a blood draw that I think I just read because I'm curious right now. But there's a whole nother issue outside the criminal component of just, from a liability standpoint. We've seen with cops right now, right? The Attorney General put out a memo earlier this year, which is very controversial, and PBA has come out. Mayor Phillip in Jersey City has come out against it. That would basically say that police are allowed to use adult use cannabis products. And there's another viewpoint, and particularly in Jersey City, where you have to purchase your own weapon. You can't. The ATF won't allow you to get a firearms purchaser license if you are using cannabis. You can either lie on your application or be truthful and then be denied. So there's still some kinks in this right now of trying to figure out what does impairment mean? Because from a liability standpoint, if you're on the job or if you're operating a motor vehicle, there's arbitrary standards. And the other interesting thing, this became an issue, particularly around the debates around Black Lives Matter and some of the racial social justice components of this movement. Should we allow an arbitrary standard that would potentially allow police to target black and brown drivers, right? Oh, they're high. We had a DRE come, and it's a subjective test, and I think that's part of what's going on with the Supreme Court decision too. But that is still a challenge right now. That is an open-ended one. Right.
Well, the law does provide that the odor of marijuana is not reasonable articulable suspicion to stop or search, which was good that they added that. But I think that it's also likely that if a law enforcement officer were to pull somebody over and smell the odor of burnt marijuana, they may also then argue that they believe that they were under the influence, which would then give them the ability to search a vehicle. That's a whole other issue. But yeah, there's a lot of these little tangential issues related to criminal aspects that I think will be interesting to see how they kind of pan out over the next year or so.
One thing, just real quick, we had as a component originally, although it was jettisoned in the final effort. Again, remember the enactment of this bill took place post summer of Black Lives Matter in 2021. There was a discussion at one point about requiring the presence of burnt marijuana in a vehicle, similar akin to an open container, as a per se violation. That was scrapped. What remained in the bill, which was still very controversial and remains controversial, is there is funding to replace drug dogs, right, that were previously trained to hit on marijuana and couldn't be retrained, and to increase DREs, although that now is still subject to a Supreme Court challenge. And those two items, which remained in the enactment bill, were very controversial pieces given the climate.
I bet. The New Jersey CannaBusiness Association, you're general counsel for that organization. Yes. Tell me about it and what's been going on. I've been seeing different things, but explain to us what that association is.
It's the Chamber of Commerce of Weed, and that's the president's and former president Scott Rutter. This is an organization that really came to be the melting pot. And exactly that. It's a business-to-business type of effort. It's played a large role in both the advocacy piece from a business component side, and they represent everyone from the huge MSOs to the small, minority-owned, women-owned, ex-offender, single practitioner coming into the market, and an encouragement among their membership, which are both touching the plant, prospective operators, to ancillary companies that, engineering, accounting, legal, all the like. The goal there was to create this melting pot and then to advocate for different things, both from a governmental, from a legislative side, but also from a regulatory side. And they've been very successful in doing that and been part of this education experience. And previously, Scott Rutter, former Assemblyman Scott Rutter, and former Mayor Scott Rutter, who brought, and by the way, on the Republican side, and former Army veteran, Scott brought a lot of interesting sort of viewpoints to the table and helped guide this movement too from the business side. And now Ed DeVoe, who's taken over as the president, comes from former state lobbyist side of the world, brings a level of substance and understanding of the governmental process to this arena too. So it's been fun working in that environment, but it's an ongoing experiment.
Have there been any estimates as to the amount of revenue this new law will generate for the state? And secondly, where is the money going?
Great questions. Long time ago, there was an estimate made. This is probably back around 2015, 2016, that we could generate about $300 million annually. In some context, the state just passed the largest budget ever. I think it was almost $51 billion in annual revenue. So 300 million is not a small amount of change, but it's a drop in the bucket in a $50 billion budget. So it's not life-changing money. It's probably operational money. That money is going to go to some extent to fund the general fund. I mean, all money that comes in for some extent purposes goes into the general fund and then gets reallocated each budget year by the legislature and the governor. But there are some earmarks for these funds. These funds are going to go to the CRC. And one exciting thing, so when the bill passed originally in the spring of 21, there were prohibitions on using any state funds to support a cannabis business because the lawmakers did not want any of the state money going to the dirty cannabis experiment, except they realized they're creating all these small businesses, and the EDA does not have the ability to provide, nor does the CRC, small business help, either through loans or grants. So just last week, the legislature passed a bill to correct that. And the EDA now has been tasked, well, if the governor signs this law, which I think he will, the EDA will be tasked with creating a small business program in conjunction with the CRC to allow for some financial support. And another great asset that's in the mix now, and I give a lot of credit to the CRC and this administration, my old friend Melanie Willoughby, who's formerly the president of New Jersey Business Industry Association, she is now what our former Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno was back in the Christie administration. She is the head of the New Jersey Business Action Center, and that's the one-stop shop for businesses of any type. If you have a problem with the DEP, or you have a question about a certain governmental process, or you want to check on where your WBE application is at Treasury, this is a concierge service. It's really a well-kept secret in state government. Melanie's in charge of that operation, and the BAC has also been tasked now with outreach to these new cannabis awardees to help getting them the resources that are going to need out of state government to be successful too. So you're starting to see some activity come out of state government now to really energize and support these small businesses that are going to be awarded out of the CRC.
It's exciting. It really is exciting. And there's, like you said, there's just so much that's on the forefront. I'm curious, what conflicts exist with the federal government, given the fact that the federal government has still made marijuana illegal? Is it essentially a banking issue?
Yeah, I mean, in some of the ways, it's minimal. I mean, you ignore it and you move on and you go. But in some ways, it's a nightmare. So, for example, banking, certainly one of them, and remains a challenge. However, there are certain banks that are working in credit unions now that figure this out, and banking has become less of a problem. Still not perfect, but less of a problem. I think that the business costs and access to capital still are, though. If I want to open a bakery today, I can go to my bank and get a loan. If I want to open a cannabis dispensary, I can't. And that's a real challenge, and who can get access to capital and then access to this market and who can't. We have a whole variety of things, though, that are still broken at the federal level. I mean, well, by the way, we could do 30 podcasts.
We could talk all day. I mean, there's so many different issues. It's great.
But on this one, the idea here that we don't have yet the ability for a doctor to prescribe cannabis, not recommend, prescribe it, and an insurance payer, whether it's on the workers' comp side or on the health side, be able to reimburse for this is insane. And moreover, it's insane that we don't do this at the Medicaid, Medicare, and VA level, where you're seeing these profound benefits in the medical space, but the federal government literally has its head in the sand. And the interesting thing now is it's not cannabis lobbyists lobbying for these change. It's the banking lobby, it's the U.S. Chamber, it's insurance companies lobbying for normalcy at the federal level as it particularly relates to medical cannabis. So I'm hopeful, but I will say this to you, I'm a student of politics, I don't think you're going to see any change anytime soon. I think, we're headed towards probably a cataclysmic effort on the Democratic side come the fall. I think you'll see Republican control in both houses post-November. And interestingly, one of the challenges for Democrats sometimes is they try to make the perfect be the enemy of the good. There are good bills on the docket right now that could normalize cannabis for certain efforts right now. The MORE Act is a very good bill. The SAFE Act is a very good bill. These are bills that are going to deal with banking. They're going to deal with some of these insurance issues and help, but they don't do everything perfectly. They don't deal with all the racial and social justice components that some liberal Democrats want. So my prediction to you will be next year in February 23, a Republican Congress will send this Democratic president the first legislation that may get enacted at the federal level related to cannabis normalcy.
Okay. We will all await that anxiously. Just to wrap up, on the state level, what do you think the future holds from a legal perspective? What is the, won't hold you to it, but what do you think the timeline looks like for the processing of, class 4, 5, and 6 licenses?
I think 23 is going to be a robust year for that. I think the remainder of 22 is going to be about moving through applications and continuing to onboard the pre-2018, the 2019 round, and the new folks that are coming in. I think in the legal world, I think it's going to continue to explode. I think you're going to see mergers and acquisitions among companies. I think you're going to see continued growth in the real estate space here as these companies continue to search for places to open. I think you're going to start to see deals related to products. I joke with one client or one colleague I had. If one client is engaged with a retailer is engaged with a cultivator, and the cultivator loses their crop, and the retailer then wants to sue for breach as a result of the fact they can't service the retail contract, is that enforceable? Because it's cannabis, right? There's the product. And these are right. These are going to be very interesting and novel. It's a normal contract claim, but it's cannabis. So this is where all of this is going to take on a very interesting, we were just talking about the federal laws. How does a court interpret that, and where are we going to be? And we haven't seen that yet. We haven't really seen a breach of contract claim on a failure to perform on a contract for, supply of a legal product under the federal law.
Whole new body of law. And it's great that we have you as an expert in the field from the legal perspective that's been involved, going back a number of years. And just to wrap up, how did you get involved in this? What was your background as an attorney prior to the cannabis being on the forefront of legalization?
I'm a government guy. I mean, my career started in 1997. My job was to follow United States Congressman Rob Andrews around with a clipboard and make sure he was on time to events and take notes from the people that we met and get him back in the office. A very, very significant role in my professional life. But I had the pleasure of meeting a constituent that drove down to the Capitol, in the United States Capitol, with his wife, who was afflicted with MS, and came unannounced into the congressman's office and pled for a meeting. And my boss decided to see him and had no intention of supporting medical cannabis. California had just adopted the law in 96. This is 97, a little after. And I watched this man and this woman, who he was wheeling around the Capitol in a gurney because she couldn't walk, change his mind, and changed his mind on what he said was a bunch of hippies out in California, and this is stupid, and we shouldn't be paying attention to it, to, oh my God, these are real people with real lives, and this is helping them, and why should I stand in the way? So that was my first education. I had the pleasure of serving two speakers in the New Jersey General Assembly. I was the executive director to then Speaker Joe Roberts, and had the pleasure of serving Sheila Oliver when she was speaker in the Assembly as her executive director, and I helped to write the state's first medical law in 2009. And again, I got to interact with patients who came to us to talk about why the state should do this. And this was common sense. We were denying people life-saving medicine. We were denying jobs and a new industry to a state that needed it. We were built on the pharma and agriculture economy. Geez, Jersey was built for this. Mm-hmm. So when I left government and I joined Archer, my job was to create their government affairs program, and I did. And that's what you do, right? You go into a job and do what you're asked to do. Don't try to do something different. But I went to the firm several years after we were successfully established there and said, I'd like to do this. And I give my firm a lot of credit. They could have said, maybe they did. He's out of his mind, but and it was a very difficult time. This is like 2014, 2015, and this is not a popular topic. And so my view there was, I can lend my experience in the law, my experience in government and government affairs, some communications abilities to kind of try to change hearts and minds, and let's build our economy, right? This is, about jobs in the economy just as much as anything else is. Let's give people the relief they need. Our medical program was still broken, it wasn't maturing. And then the other side of this is there's so much opportunity here for young entrepreneurs to jump into a new market. We've seen this in the craft beer industry. And if Jersey's in any way able to tap into some of that energy to create a craft cannabis industry here, I like where we're going. So that was the motivation. And one guy just saying, I can do this, I can help. And I that's what I tried to do.
It sounds like it was a long time coming, but based upon a lot of years of experience. And once again, it takes us back to just the facts that there was, when you look at at the kind of cost benefit, you were able to address concerns on a case-by-case basis and on an issue-by-issue basis.
That's really it. And I think the thing that we did really well was we had a very diverse group of people that we welcomed to the table, and we kept building the table bigger. But I think the other side of this is you just come at this from a common sense perspective. The idea here was very simple. This is not a danger to society, and we have to prove that to you first. But I'll never forget one of the first press conferences we did. Dr. Nathan, who's a phenomenal advocate and a psychologist that joined our organization and now ran this and created Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, said, if you're worried about your children getting access to marijuana, I want to tell you they do have it already. Our goal is to put it behind a storefront. Our goal is to make it not cool, right? To make this as, it's something that they have more access to marijuana now than they do alcohol, right? So part of this effort was, if that's your issue, respectfully, then you're failing. Okay, prohibition has failed on that effort. So if that's the only thing holding you back, and kids were a big issue, we're not marketing to kids, and that's been a huge tenet of this regulatory rubric too. When you talk about what you can have and what you can't have in terms of logos, labels, products, nothing close to anything that would come near a minor.
Bill, if any of our listeners want to get more information about some of the things that we've discussed, where should they go? And if they want to reach out to you to potentially retain your services, how do they get a hold of you?
Thanks. The best thing I can tell you, and I can't say it enough, is go to the CRC website. If you're interested on what potentially is available for you as a business, go there first before you call any lawyer or any lobbyist or anyone, because a lot of it is either going to educate you on what questions you should be asking, or they might decide, hey, this isn't for me. I was mistaken and I'm not going to waste my time. But I really do think that this state has done an amazing job of really outlining all the different opportunities, including employment. If you're looking for a job at the CRC, there's opportunities there to work. For me, I'm proud to work at Archer Law. We're the fourth largest firm in the state, located in South Jersey, but all throughout the state. And www.archerlaw is where you can find me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I can't thank you enough. And boy, a year ago, I thought, what's going on in the state of New Jersey? Why are they almost asleep at the switch? Why are they taking so long to bring adult use cannabis to market? But when you break it down as to all the moving pieces that needed to fit together in order to get all these regulations in place, it's really impressive that they have done what they have done in the last year and a half.
That concludes our conversation and this series. Don't forget to subscribe for alerts. You're going to love our upcoming guests. If you're interested in starting a podcast, visit the contact page at njcriminalpodcast.com and send Meg a message. She'd love to discuss your legal podcast, and her producer has experience with podcast launches for businesses of all types. Always a fun